Welcome everybody to Forza Horizon 5, and today we're taking a look at the 1964 Plymouth Belvedere. Now this is part of the 5th generation that lasted between 1962 and 1964, with this 64 version being particularly special as it had the only year where it had a slant back roofline, unlike the prior years. And yeah, that design of roofline was so popular that actually sales increased by quite a dramatic amount. And yeah, it's the only year as well to have the engine that this car has, which we'll get to in a minute. And yeah, I adore the look of this car, to be honest. It's only the 7th Plymouth we've ever had in a Forza game before. Obviously we don't have all 6 of the other ones in this game right now, but yeah, we've only had 7 Plymouths now, including this one. So yeah, and I'm really glad it's in the game. It's exactly the kind of car that is right up my street, and yeah, which again we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, interior wise, it's as you'd expect from a 60s car. Not much in the way of equipment, you know, you got wind down windows, and that's pretty much it outside of a heater and aircon basically. But you do have a 4-speed manual gearbox. You also do have a rev, I think that's a rev counter. No, it's oil. Yeah, it's oil down at the bottom. No rev counter though to match the gearbox, so yeah, you basically have to listen to the engine and then change gear when you think you're going to get up to the rev limit. But yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of interior. Not a whole lot, but then again, you don't want a whole lot to distract you when you've got the amount of power that this car has. It's got a decent amount of space in the back as well, so it's practical in that regard. And it's hugely practical in terms of its boot space, because as you can see, you can pretty much fit a European car in there. It's absolutely gigantic. So yeah, practicality wise it is great. Looks wise I really like it. You've got twin exhausts, plenty of chrome all over and on the side as well. Got your typical chromed hubcaps as well. And on top of that, you've got a really spectacular engine underneath. Now granted, it is not the Hemi V8 that powered the racing NASCAR versions of this car to victory at Daytona. In fact, 3 Plymouth Belvederes became in the top 3, first, second and third with that Hemi V8. But it does have a 7-litre V8 producing 365 horsepower and 470 pounds-feet of torque. Now this is the Wedge V8, not the Hemi. The Hemi won't come in until a few years later because they weren't really ready for road use at that time. But yeah, the Wedge V8 is still pretty decent enough. It's the same size as the Hemi, but it's got about 60 horsepower less and about 20 pounds-feet of torque less as well. So yeah, there is a difference in terms of horsepower and torque, but not as big as you might expect, and for everyday road use you really wouldn't notice that difference at all. And what I really like is that you've got the 426 on the hood ornament there, denoting the engine size, so that's really nice. Weight wise, it does weigh a fair bit, but not as much as some cars from the time, at 3,720 pounds. But you look at an Oldsmobile Tornado or a Mercury from the time, and they're weighing way more than this. So yeah, that's not particularly heavy as far as cars of this type go. And even though it has been denoted as a muscle car, I really wouldn't consider it to be one. I'd say it's more of a personal luxury car or a luxury coupe, because yeah, it's not got the you know, the bravado of a muscle car, for instance. As yeah, outside of the engine and the amount of power it's got going on, it does on the whole look like an ordinary Belvedere. But nonetheless, let's get out onto the open road and see what this car can do. So yeah, being a big powerful V8 rear-wheel drive car from America in the 60s, this is going to be at home at the drag strip. So let's see what it can do on this drag strip before we hit the speed camera, and then we'll get it round the track. So yeah, it's got this same kind of typical, you know, rev limit as a lot of cars from this time from America. But yeah, it's got really good acceleration because it only has a 4-speed gearbox, and the gearing is, yeah, really rather nicely spaced out. So we're going to get up to 115 miles an hour, which is fairly decent for a car of this type and age. Obviously, like I said, you can find faster out there than this. So there are some cars out there that have maybe slightly less in the way of power, but they have a significant amount of less in the way of weight. So yeah, it's all about balance really in some regards. I'd say a Plymouth Barracuda is probably the better of the Plymouths from the 60s in terms of the rear-wheel drive V8 monsters of the time. Even though it's got a lot less in the way of power, it also has a lot less in the way of weight. And it's a much smaller car as well, so it's much better in terms of handling than this is, which, yeah, is something we're definitely going to get to in a second. But let's see what the stats are for it before we hit the track. So yeah, as you'd expect, we're not in the highest of class, we're in low-end C class. And those are the stats. So top speed is pretty good, acceleration is decent, but everything else is on the lower side of things, especially the brakes, because yeah, braking technology in America wasn't exactly great at the time. But then you add on to that fact that you've also got a very heavy car, then yeah, the braking is never going to be the best thing going. But part of the reason to like these cars is because of their flaws, not in spite of them. So yeah, but nonetheless, I'll get on to that in a second. But let's hear what this car sounds like first, and then we'll talk about it some more. So yeah, pretty good sounding V8 to be honest. Nothing remarkable out in comparison to, you know, other cars in the from the same decade, but it's still a good sounding V8 in its own right. And acceleration is fairly solid as well. 0 to 60 in 6.766 seconds. 0 to 100 in 15.962 seconds. And it'll go into a top speed which is far higher than the average from other cars of the time of 155 miles an hour. Most cars from the period, due to their shorter gearing and some cars even only having 2 or 3 speeds in terms of their gearbox, can only do about 130, 140. The Pontiac GTO, for instance, can't even do 130 from a year after this. So yeah, top speed wise this is pretty great, but in terms of handling and braking, it's as you might well expect. It's got extremely soft suspension, it leans more than a ship in a storm, and it stops about as well as a ship in a storm as well, because yeah, the brakes are not particularly great. But I like that in a car. I like flaws in a car. It means you get used, you've got to learn how to drive the car because it's not perfect. You also can enjoy the hilarity of just how much it's leaning and everything else that goes with that. So yeah, I actually like cars like this because they are fun to drive because of their flaws and not in spite of them. I'm not trying to justify their flaws, you know. At the end of the day, there were better handling muscle cars or even better handling V8 rear-wheel drive cars from the time, but yeah, it's still fun to drive. And yeah, I quite frankly have this kind of scenario in my head where I'm being chased by the cops and there's sirens blaring and there's hubcaps flying off the car into the near distance, and there's a strategically placed pile of boxes that I'm going to drive through or anything like that, and that's just the kind of thing it's conjuring up. Because look at it, it's sliding around like anything, leaning awfully so, and yeah, it's just really, really fun to drive. So I'm really glad I've put a car like this in the game. Quite frankly, put more of them in. Obviously there are some muscle cars coming in the festival plays this is a part of. We've got the 66 Chevy Nova, we've also got the 68 Pontiac Firebird, and in terms of personal luxury cars, we've also got the Lincoln Continental from 1962. It should also be a pretty big boat to be driving. But yeah, I'm just pleased that this car is in the game because it's not a car we've ever had in a Forza game before. Unlike those other 3 I've mentioned, they've at least been in one Forza game before. So yeah, to have a brand new V8 classic from America is always a good thing. So, but you do have to work for it, because this isn't just 20. This isn't only 20 points. This is 40 points in the festival playlist, which yeah, obviously does take a little bit longer to get than the 20 points that are normally for where you get your exclusive cars via the festival players. But trust me, it is well worth it, especially if you're into your classic American cars, because I'm sure you'll have just as much fun as I am driving it. Nonetheless, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.